Hi, I'm Femi OK. You're in the stream. Authorities building the case against Inauguration Day protesters in the US want access to their social media accounts. But civil rights advocates warn that could put Americans' privacy at risk. Today, part two of our discussion on the threat to free speech in the United States.
I'm Didi Das. I'm an engineer at Google, and I'm in the stream.
The trial of 6 people accused of felony rioting during US President Donald Trump's inauguration is underway in Washington, D.C. The case could determine whether the government continues prosecuting around 200 people arrested over the protest organized by Disrupt J20. That's an anti-capitalist and anti-fascist group. As authorities build their case, they're asking for help from Facebook and other internet companies. Earlier this year, the DC Police Department subpoenaed Facebook, demanding that the company hand over the social records of those arrested. But privacy advocates say this is just a fishing expedition for political dissidents. Here to talk about this in our studio, we have Scott Michelman. He's the senior staff attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union, and the ACLU is representing several of the defendants in the case. Also in the studio, Lacey McAuley. She's an activist whose Facebook account is one of the 3 that the Department of Justice is targeting in a search warrant. Joining via Skype from San Francisco, Stephanie LaCambra. She's a criminal defense staff attorney with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And in Baltimore, Maryland, Bernard Woods. He's the senior reporter for the Real News Network. He covered the J20 protest and has been covering the trial as well. Hello, everybody. It's good to have you here. Lacey, Facebook sent you an email. They wrote to you and said what?
Well, Facebook sent me an email. I wasn't expecting anything. Early September, I opened my email and I see that basically there's a warrant from the, which I assume is from the federal government, for my Facebook data, all of my Facebook data. So I kind of communicated with some of my friends, and it turns out that actually there are 3 warrants out for myself, another individual, our personal private Facebook data, and also the Facebook page Disrupt J20, and that's the one of the groups that protested at Donald Trump's inauguration, the first day he took office.
So you were there and you were organizing on Jan 20. What did you do? Where did you go?
Well, so I had been organizing and helping to communicate and basically tell the story of the activists who cared deeply about protesting Donald Trump on that day. And so, you know, my name was all over the media work, the press releases. Our website had my name and phone number on it. And so, you know, I guess when the federal government decided to just throw the book at protesters, when they decided they would, you know, implement these strict, you know, measures to try to stifle dissent, they didn't have to look very hard to find my name and also the name of a few other people involved.
Sure. Stephanie, is this possible for the government to just say, we want to have a look at that social media account and that one?
Well, the government can always have a whole slew of tools that they can use to get at someone's digital information. With Facebook, they sent first subpoenas and then I think followed it up with warrants, and in fact actually served Facebook with a series of gag orders, trying to make sure that Facebook wouldn't notify its users that this is what the DOJ was doing, the Department of Justice. What's really concerning here is that that they were really trying to keep this under wraps for so long. I think precisely because they knew that as soon as the public learned about what they were doing and how far-reaching their kind of digital dragnet was cast, that there would be widespread protest against that and really severe public scrutiny, which in fact happened once it came to light.
Digital dragnet, that's a great phrase. That means anything that they want, they can just get grabbed digitally. Is that what you mean by that?
Well, they can certainly send legal orders to the various third-party providers, Facebook, Instagram, Google, for that information. that you give as part of your patronage of those platforms. It's another question as to whether or not they are legally entitled to that information, whether or not they've provided probable cause to get at some of that content. Here in the US, when you serve something like a subpoena, you're entitled to certain kinds of information. The subscriber information, maybe some basic like name, address, payment information. However, if you serve a search warrant, then you might actually get into content of that account and communications, contact lists, a whole host of other information that has very widespread consequences for not just you, but all of the people that you communicate with.
Yeah, and could I just mention to, add on to what Stephanie just said, the data that they're looking for on my Facebook includes, deeply personal things. I mean, Facebook is one of those places where your intimate life is played out.
Sure.
It involves conversations with my family members that are very personal. It involves actually details about something that I'm public about, which is that I'm a survivor of sexual assault. It involves also basic, basic communication about political events. And I think we should be allowed to talk about Donald Trump. We should be allowed to talk about, political events as well in private.
So, Lacey, I have your permission to look at your Facebook account. So I just want to show people, just to remind people what it is that law enforcement might then be able to have access to. So there's about, which is about you, your friends, the photographs. I'm not going to scroll down because I do want to respect your privacy, but all of that is out there, and then they can then get in touch with all of those other various people as well. So that's pretty serious.
Well, so I don't know, Scott, if you wanted to add something about what exactly they're looking at, but so we basically challenged the warrants, and with some good results, actually.
Scott.
So the ACLU, when Lacey and several other folks contacted us in September, we had been involved as a friend of the court in fighting the gag order that Stephanie mentioned that was on Facebook to prevent it from telling Lacey and 2 other individuals about the threat to their privacy. Then when the gag order was lifted, Facebook did the right thing. It notified Lacey and the others. They came to us, and we filed these motions to quash. Now, what that means is we said to the court, these warrants go too far. They ask for all of the information contained for a 90-day period in 3 specific accounts. But all the information goes beyond subscriber, basic payment records, or IP addresses. It goes to their personal communications, their wall posts, their status, their friends, their deleted information, their pictures, their videos, their private chats that they intended for only one other person. The government said, we're going to take all of this, and then we're going to search around and see if we find anything suspicious. We think we're looking for rioting. We have probable cause to believe there was this riot that happened, and they convinced a judge they had probable cause to think there was evidence somewhere of this supposed riot. But they said, we're going to go through the entire 90 days worth to see what we find. And that's where the Fourth Amendment places a very important limit. What it says is the government can't go fishing. The government has to specify exactly what it's looking for and show probable cause, which is a legal term meaning that there's pretty good reason to suspect something, and just go straight to that thing. So put in very concrete terms, in the physical world, if the police have probable cause to search for a car on my property, they can get a warrant for the garage. They can't get a warrant for my bedroom. And what they've done here, metaphysically, is they've gone into, they've effectively gone into Lacey's, the personal rooms of her house, her bedroom, so to speak, where she talks with a romantic partner, where she talks about an experience, a horrible experience involving sexual assault that she survived. The government doesn't need that information. They have no right to that information. It has nothing to do with any alleged riot. I mean, we obviously don't agree with the characterization of a riot, but even accepting that as a premise, there's no reason for them to read that information.
Clumsy, intimidation, where would you put this?
I think it's intimidation. I don't think it's clumsy, because when we challenged the warrant and went to court a month ago, the U.S. attorney started backpedaling. He said, oh, well, we don't need all the photographs for these dates. We'll just take this smaller group of dates. And he basically agreed that they could exempt some friends lists. He agreed that they could exempt some names of people, of third parties that communicated with Laci's Facebook friends, and where their posts appeared, that their names would be blacked out. So the court ordered significant limits. We don't think the court went far enough, so we're continuing to fight. But the fact the government so easily gave up and recognized that it didn't need all the information it had asked for suggests to me that they went broad. Yes. And they were going fishing, and they were going fishing basically until somebody stood up and said, no, you can't do that. And then they said, oh, well, okay, we'll pull back a little. But it has a chilling effect.
I'd actually say they went even further than that in the Dreamhost warrant. The DOJ initially demanded that
So Stephanie, just walk back a little bit and explain what the Dreamhost warrant is for our international audience.
Dreamhost is actually the hosting platform that hosted the Disrupt J20 website. So they provide the service that allows the Disrupt J20 website to function. And the DOJ served Dreamhost with a warrant basically requesting that it turn over nearly 1.3 million IP addresses of all visitors to the Disrupt J20 website. So millions of visitors, activists, reporters, anyone who just wanted to check out the site or would have records of their visits turned over to the government. That would be inclusive of journalists who, after the story broke about Disrupt J20, decided to click on the website to see what it was about. And the warrant actually also sought production of all emails associated with the account, unpublished content like draft blog posts and photos. And it really took a while to get DOJ to back off from how broadly they had requested the information about people that were communicating with the site.
Baynard, I hear you trying to get in. Let me just play this to you first of all. This is Jude Ortiz. He's a member of Defend J20 group. Have a listen to what he had to say about this situation.
The use of criminal charges, including conspiracy and felony inciting a riot, are clear indicators that this case is not about broken windows, but about criminalizing dissent, political organizing, and political association.
Baynard, as a journalist, how are you reporting this?
I mean, it's a really astounding thing because we have data from 187 cell phones that is also part of that. We have government surveillance, we have police body cam footage, and then all of the websites that they're trying to get user records from. And to show how much the government knows exactly what it's doing here, they try to limit all access to what we have. They have a protective order that said it was illegal to share the body cam footage from police body cams. They overturned that, but still made it illegal to play the audio from that footage because they believe that they feel that it could be used to intimidate police officers. And yet we know that the police department gave the names of all of the people arrested that day to a right-wing site. And so they're trying to use data that they get from defendants in this case to intimidate them while trying to keep the press from having data that should be public data like police body camera footage.
So I'm just thinking about organizers, what it's like to be an organizer right now in 2017. We've got Brown Beret Sergio here who says, I probably should be a little bit more careful, but I'm not going to let the regime scare me. A regime just leapt out at me. It was kind of amazing to think about America as a regime. I just try not to show other faces too much in terms of what he's using on social media platform, what he's showing. How is this changing how you operate as an organizer?
Well, I think organizers are actually a little more terrified right now. You know, to think that the act of kind of planning a protest, something that in the United States we've been able to do openly for a long time, can be characterized as, you know, being a part of a conspiracy to plan a riot is actually, it's very chilling. And you know, I think that one of the things that we all need to see here in terms of the big picture is that Donald Trump would love our country to be more authoritarian and would love for us to actually go in the direction of fascism. You know, we see countries like Turkey or maybe the Philippines right now that have in recent times actually taken that sharp kind of turn toward more authoritarianism. And I think we all need to be concerned about the dangerous direction that the United States is in danger of going, actually, if we are not able to actually prevail in these cases.
So Scott, is this telling you, when you're looking at the way people's social media accounts are being examined and looked at and requested to have subpoenaed, is this telling you that the current administration is concerned about people not liking what they're doing?
It's certainly going to have a very chilling effect on two different types of things. First, the use of social media just to communicate, for everyday communication. When you want to talk with your close friends or family about something personal, now you have to start thinking, well, is the government going to get a warrant for this later? Is something that some friend of mine has done going to trigger their interest, and they're going to have to ask the court for 3 months of all my communications? I mean, that's really quite a, I love Stephanie's digital dragnet phrase. But the other equally important chilling effect here is on First Amendment rights, because you have organizers who are using these tools to these social media tools on Facebook and Twitter and elsewhere to organize themselves, to plan events and facilitate collective action. If they feel like the government is trying to map out a network of anti-administration activists, that is going to be very chilling. And you have, in fact, the administration itself investigating the very people who are protesting it. So it's and that, combined with the January 20th prosecutions for these felony charges carrying 60 years or more, send a clear message. If you're against this administration, you're not safe.
That's really clear from the, I mean, I mentioned this in the last segment, but they're not prosecuting the Charlottesville protesters, the racist and Nazis who were there, who we have records of conspiring to riot or disrupt traffic that day. And you're not seeing, and joking about running people over, which they later did. We're not seeing any prosecution of people except for the political enemies of the president. And as part of this prosecution, they've been really conspiring with other right-wing activists like Project Veritas, who, which is a right-wing sting group that say they infiltrated a planning meeting. And so the government is happy to use that footage to prosecute people that it sees as its political enemies.
Siobhan says here on Twitter, I gather from what I can that most folks dismiss the stakes, thinking, well, if I didn't break anything, I won't be arrested. And she says, I think this is naive. 210 of the accused never broke anything either, and they're facing the same charges. And this is just going back to the situation on January the 20th, where so many protesters were just scooped up and then arrested. Bearing in mind your experience, Lacey, what would you respond to that tweet, and how would you respond to that tweet?
Yeah,
if you've got nothing to hide, why would you worry if they wanted to have a look into your Facebook account, for instance?
I mean, I think that, you know, when we as people fail to stand up for actually those who are marginalized, in this case, we're being marginalized. We activists in the United States are being marginalized, but also people of color in the United States who are subject to police violence, people who are transgender in the United States, and many other marginalized communities. I could go on, but you know, when we fail to actually stand up for those people, then I mean, it basically like leads us into this place where if you are not staying in line, if you're not kind of marching in lockstep, you know, you're made to feel that you're doing something wrong. I think we need to celebrate differences. We need to celebrate diversity, and unfortunately, I guess this is one of those moments where we need to stand up for the right to dissent, and just also the right to be people. If I could just like mention something that has very personally impacted my life, you know, I have a family member who, in recent times, has actually. You know, we started talking, and the family member shared with me a very deeply personal story that impacts my family. It has nothing to do with anything else. It has nothing to do with activism or politics. It's just a deeply personal story. Well, that family member had, you know, was communicating with me like via Facebook, and has that family member since actually felt the need to unfriend me on Facebook and delete that entire conversation. So I think that, you know, this is impacting my family, this is impacting my relationships, and you know, we need to feel safe to talk about politics. We need to feel safe to talk about intimate details. And when we're not safe to talk about those things, it's a slippery slope down into authoritarianism and fascism.
Stephanie, I see some lawyers like the ACLU pushing back at the Department of Justice, asking for access to people's social media accounts. What about the social media platforms themselves? How are they doing in this situation?
Well, I mean, different platforms are taking differing levels of defense, but I think Dreamhost is a great example of what we would expect and hope that a platform would do for its users, that it would actually go to court and say, no, we're going to fight this search warrant. It is overbroad. We are going to stand up for the rights of our users and say that you don't have the right to get access to all of this information. Same with Facebook, when they tried to gag Facebook from sharing that information of just the request with its users, actually, you know, kind of went out and into the community and kind of sent out the bat signal and was like, hey, this is happening to us, we could use some help, and put out the call for amicus to weigh in with the court to explain why this was such an important issue of public import that the court really needed to scrutinize this request to keep information from the public.
Let me share with you a comment from Angel Bellerin. Have a listen.
If it wasn't for the fact that the group I was traveling with on the 20th of January was running 7 minutes behind the morning of the 20th, I very easily could find myself included in the list of J20 defendants. I've never, in the decade plus that I've been protesting since the Bush administration, I've never experienced the amount of force and complete lack of consideration. It will not impede my decision to continue to protest.
That's Angel's take, but Scott, being realistic, following the J20 cases, the defendants, what's happening with protesters around the United States, what do you feel the impact is? Where are we right now with this idea that you can go out and protest and safely do so?
Where we are is in a very precarious spot where the administration's overreactions on January 20th, from the very start, from the arrests on January 20th, carrying through to the overbroad searches and the overbroad prosecutions based on a guilt by association theory, all of that has a dramatic chilling effect on people's willingness to communicate, to go out and protest, to dissent, to share their views, to associate for political reasons. Those are erosions of core First Amendment freedoms that we take for granted in the United States, and we need to stand up and defend them.
I think that's a really good point. We need to actually not let ourselves be silenced. Even though it might be a little scary, we need to actually keep standing up and using our voices and getting out there.
What platforms are you now organizing on?
You know, we are still organizing and we are still doing
things. Or maybe you can't tell me.
And I think I don't think I should actually talk about the platforms, as it might become a subject of investigation.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right. This is a very delicate conversation, done very well. Thank you so much for Lacey and Scott and Stephanie and Bernard as well for being part of our conversation. There are some people who do not know, Bernard, about the J20 case. Why do you think that is? Why is it so quiet right now?
The mainstream press in America has done a terrible job of covering this case, which is, I mean, it's fascinating as much as it's important, with all of the kind of getting into all of these issues of digital property and private information. And so it's a fascinating case. So I don't understand why the mainstream press, when 2 reporters are still facing charges, when hundreds of Americans are facing charges that really threaten their First Amendment, why the mainstream press hasn't
just giving us all the reasons why they should be paying more attention. Thank you so much, guests, for being with us for this show. Take care, everybody. We'll see you online.